Hey guys, what's going on? It's Caleb Beck01. Thank you for joining me again for another random album review. Today's album is by a band that I'd probably say are in my top 5 favourite bands of all time. And it's sort of unfortunate that I haven't got to really speak about them much yet on my channel, especially in this series, so glad that I finally get to do that today. Without any more delay, the album is From Under the Cork Tree by the band Fall Out Boy. Yes, so From Under the Cork Tree is Fall Out Boy's second full-length studio album, follow-up to their debut album Take This to Your Grave, and this is sort of where Fall Out Boy started to make a name for themselves in more mainstream. Not quite hitting their pinnacle yet. I'd say the pinnacle sort of came with the follow-up to this album being Infinity on High, but as I said, this is sort of where they made a more cemented name for themselves in the genre, so I'm really excited to talk about this one today. As usual, we'll talk a little bit about the history of myself and this album, my thoughts on the album as a whole, and then of course break down a few of the tracks and a rating towards the end. So make sure you guys stick around for that. As usual guys, feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments below and we can discuss that together. But without delaying any longer, I'm super excited to talk about this. As I said, one of my favourite bands of all time, Fall Out Boy, and their sophomore album, From Under the Cork Tree. So as I said, a little bit of a bummer that I haven't got to feature Fall Out Boy so much on my channel so far, because Fall Out Boy, especially this era of Fall Out Boy, I'd say from this album all the way to Folie à Deux, just those 3 albums, masterpieces. So it's a little bit of a bummer that I haven't spoken too much about Fall Out Boy so far on my channel, but I recently actually included this album on one of my top 10 lists that I did not too long ago. It was top 10 biggest improvements between albums. I'll link that in the description below if you want to check that out. And I actually had this album ranked around position 7 or 8. And how I did that was, obviously, I picked out bands and artists that I feel like between consecutive albums had big improvements. And as I said, I had this around 7 or 8. I compared this to their follow-up album being Infinity on High. And, you know, looking from the outside, yes, Infinity on High is the improvement album. I still stand by that. That album is a better album than this one. However, almost looking back, it's hard to say that that improvement even deserved a position on the list, because this album is really solid, and I've always known this album was good, but just going back to revisit this one, it just completely blew my mind, and it's more solid than I remembered it being. Yes, as I said, I still stand by Infinity on High is the better album, and technically there was an improvement, but as I said, controversial looking back now, did it even deserve a spot on this list? Continuing on that point, I guess, the history with myself in this album don't really go too deep, because as I said, this era of Fall Out Boy is just perfection to me. As I said, from the 3 album span of this one, From Under the Cork Tree, to their follow-up being Infinity on High, and then the follow-up to that one, Folie à Deux, those 3 are just fucking masterpieces. However, comparing the other 2 to this one, the other 2 I have completely more nostalgia with. I grew up just constantly listening to Infinity on High and Folie à Deux, and this one sort of came around a little bit later. I sort of really got into this album, I'd say around middle schoolish, as in I knew a lot of the singles like Dance Dance, Sugar We're Going Down, a little less 16 Candles, a little more Touch Me, but I didn't know much of the back catalogue, so I'd say it was about middle school that I really sort of went into this album with a little bit more of a deep dive, and I'm so happy I did. And as I said, I just always feel like maybe I overlooked this album and underrate it, so I'm super excited that I get to talk about this one with you guys today. So one thing with this album, and I guess just early Fall Out Boy in general, I would say from their debut album Take This to Your Grave to their 4th album Folie à Deux, I can clearly see the band's evolution and growth, and I've never seemed to find it jarring between those 4 albums. I know not everyone agrees with me, I know that as a fact. With the band Fall Out Boy, there always just seems to be these people that come out of the woodwork, just come out of nowhere, and whatever the band releases, whether it be an album, a single, they just seem to fucking hate on it and claim that the evolution is too drastic and the band has changed their sound too much. And between the first 4 albums, as I said, I really disagree. I don't think that's the case. Yes, the sound is evolving, but it's nothing too dramatic. I think they're just overplaying it. I've really enjoyed it, but I do draw the line at Folie à Deux because I see that era of Fall Out Boy, as I said, being the band's peak, and the albums following up Folie à Deux I do see the drastic sound change. So I sort of draw the line there. But with this album in particular, I can just see the perfect middle ground, as I said, from the album before this one, Take This to Your Grave, to the follow-up album being Infinity on High. What it takes from the debut album is it carries on some of the pop-punk feels and the energy and the raw craziness that the first album had, but then also lays down a firm blueprint of the direction that the band wanted to go. And as I said, it sets up their third album being Infinity on High, which I don't think anyone can really argue as the band's crowning achievement, honestly. But I see this one as being a good middle ground, and as I said, the early discography of Fall Out Boy, I've never found it to be too jarring, and I really don't like when people bring that up and say that the band, their earlier albums, they really just changed up their sound too much. I think it's a perfect evolution. So to expand on what I was sort of talking about with the evolution of the sound, I'm going to use the track lists as a little bit of an example. You know, songs like Nobody Puts Baby in the Corner, 7 Minutes in Heaven, I Slept With Someone in Fall Out Boy. I feel like those three tracks are perfect examples of something you would hear off the previous album being Take This to Your Grave. You know, they have that pop-punk style and feel and that fast-paced energy that, as I said, you would see off the previous album. But then on the other hand, you have songs like Sugar We're Going Down, I've Got a Dark Alley, Champagne for My Real Friends, Real Pain for My Sham Friends, A Little Less 16 Candles, A Little More Touch Me, even the track Get Busy Living or Get Busy Dying. Those tracks there sort of set the blueprint and the foundation of something that you're going to hear later from the band, you know, being the follow-up album Infinity on High. And those tracks that I listed there towards the end wouldn't feel out of place on Infinity on High. But then with all that being said, there is a good middle ground, and there's a handful of songs that just feel unique to this album and give this album so much personality that the other albums sort of don't have, being songs like Dance Dance and the closing track XO. Those two tracks, just for examples, are completely unique to this album. I feel those songs have a lot of personality and a lot of style that I don't think, you know, come from the previous album being Take This to Your Grave or the follow-up being Infinity on High. So this album has a little bit of everything, and that's what I was sort of saying about the evolution of the sound. As I said, it was sort of roughly about middle school that I had a deeper dive into this album, and compared to some of the other Fall Out Boy discography that I've been mentioning, the lack of nostalgia for this album is sort of something that sort of hurts it in a little way, even though that the more I've gone on with this album, the more I've grown to be quite fond of it. But as I said, just comparing it to Infinity on High and Folie à Deux, two albums that I have insane amount of nostalgia with, this was an album that I had to sort of dig in a little bit deeper and, you know, grow a fondness for myself. You know, there were songs that I was already aware of, like, you know, tracks like Sugar We're Going Down, Dance Dance, A Little Less 16 Candles, A Little More Touch Me. I feel like everyone knew those songs, and those are just staple songs that still hold up to this day. But even myself, I had to find appreciation for some of the tracks on my own. And for example, the opening track, Our Lawyer Made Us Change the name of this song so we wouldn't get sued. That was one that just blew my mind the first time I heard it. Sophomore Slump or Comeback of the Year is another one. And then, as I said before, I Slept With Someone from Fall Out Boy. And what's the full name of that song? All I got was this stupid song written about me. Some of the song titles are so fucking long, you sort of forget, even however familiar you are with the albums, you just sort of forget what the track titles are just because they are so long. There are a handful of songs that I sort of came across on myself, so it's been a little bit of an adventure of me in this album, but man, have I grown to be really fond of this one. And now, even though how much I praise this album for holding up compared to maybe stronger discography from the band Fall Out Boy, there still is a few weaker moments on this album. You know, songs like Nobody Puts Baby in the Corner, I've Got a Dark Alley, Champagne for My Real Friends, Real Pain for My Sham Friends is one that I was a little bit disappointed in, because coming into this album, you know, as I said, in middle school, I was unfamiliar with that song, but a lot of people praise that one, but still to this time, you know, it's not a heavy hitter for me. But even with all that said, there are also songs that sort of fall in the mid-ground, you know, songs like Of All the Gin Joints in All of the World, and maybe 7 Minutes in Heaven, where they're not good, but they're not great either. Sort of a middle ground. But overall, I just feel like this album has so much to offer, and, you know, for true Fall Out Boy fans, they know how great this album is and how iconic it is. It really is a staple in the genre, whether it's pop punk or emo, however you want to talk about it, just rock albums, I feel like this one really is a staple, and a lot of people probably don't need convincing to go check this one out because a lot of people are aware how great it is. So with that being said, this is one of Fall Out Boy's strongest efforts, even if it is a little bit overlooked compared to some of their other albums. So with that being said, I am going to rate this one out of 10 right now. I am going to give Fall Out Boy's sophomore album From Under the Cork Tree an 8 out of 10, yeah. As I said, I feel like there are still stronger Fall Out Boy albums, but compared to the heavy hitters, this one can go a few rounds, it can definitely hold its own. And, as I said, there are just still so many staple songs on here. Sugar We're Going Down, Dance Dance, and as I said, some songs that are maybe hiding a little bit towards the back. Sophomore Slump, I Slept With Someone from Fall Out Boy. I just feel like this is a pleasing album for so many people, and, you don't really need to be a Fall Out Boy fan to enjoy this one. The sounds are just so crazy, as I said, such a good evolution from early discography of Fall Out Boy, and definitely one to check out if you somehow haven't. So thank you again, guys, for joining me for another random album review. As I said, I was so happy that I finally got to speak about a Fall Out Boy album, especially a Fall Out Boy album from this era. As I said, one of my favourite bands of all time, and just, as I keep saying, just getting an album from this era of Fall Out Boy just means so much to me. But as you know, guys, I also put up my tracklist ranking of the same album up at the same time. I will link it in the description below. That is where I break down the tracks individually and rank the whole album from my least favorite track to my favorite track. So make sure you guys check that out also, and I will see you guys for some more content soon. Thank you for joining me again. Thank you for sticking around if you've watched up to this point, and I'll see you guys soon. Peace.